We now have built our data source, or identified our data source, and have a connection to it. We've defined a data source view, and in both the previous videos, and now we're ready to use the Cube Wizard to build a cube that will, in a sense, sit on top of this data source view. And we're going to do that in a series of steps. We'll identify what are called measure groups in the cube. A measure group is really usually anyway a fact table, and they're the columns in the fact table that are numerical and the sense of what we want to calculate over. In other words, we want to sum those columns. We want to take the average of a column. We take the maximum or the minimum values, things of that nature. That'll give us the measures in there. And also, when we identify measure groups and we build the cube, it actually includes automatically a count of the number of records we have in that fact table. Then we're going to specify the dimensions that we're going to use, and this dimensions are just a collection of attributes that we're going to slice and dice over. And an attribute is just a column in the dimension table. And there's also another piece of terminology that we use. It's called a member, and a member is just a specific value of an attribute. So if we had a last name column, a member would be Evans for that. Then we'll build the cube, and after the cube is built, we will deploy the cube to the server. But before we deploy the cube to the server, we'll look at the SQL Server Management Studio, sort of a before picture, then build the deploy the cube, and then look at Management Studio as an after picture. So let's get started with that. So we're going to start with where we left off in the previous video. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping here so that it makes things a little simpler for us. Close that. And now we're back to this sort of schematic we have here, and we're down to the next step, the third step in terms of building the cubes. I right-click on this, and I'm going to specify a new cube, and it's going to bring up the Cube Wizard. And that's next. I'm going to take a look at the options I have in terms of the creation method. I have generally three. The first one I'm going to use existing tables, because we've already defined the data source view. So I'm going to use those tables to build my cube. I can create it's a totally empty cube if I want to sort of do it from scratch, or and build up tables from that. Or I can do something sort of reverse. I can generate tables back in the data source. So you might use that if you haven't defined your tables in your data source yet, and you want to sort of do it from this end, build the cube, and as you're building the cube, you generate the tables as well. So I'm going to use existing, since we've gone through that whole process, and now have a data source view. So I'm going to select that as my option and do a next. And what it does, now I get to do what's called select measure group tables. And remember, this is going to be the fact table, and it's using now those friendly names that we constructed earlier. And instead of fact internet sales, it has internet sales instead of dim product. And the suggest button is semi-useful. The wizard guesses if you click on it as to what you think, or what it thinks you would want for a potential measure group or a fact table. In this case, it gives me one I do want, that's the internet sales, but it gives me one I really don't want, and so I would unselect that. Generally, you're going to know which one you want as your fact table. So I'm going to identify, or my measure group table. So I'm going to identify that as my measure group table. I'm going to do next, and then it gives me a list of the dimension tables, or the measure, it gives me a list of the measures inside my my measure table, or my fact table, and these are the things that I want to aggregate over. And if you look at it, there are some that are pretty obvious. Order quantities, unit price, extended amounts, and so forth are things I probably want to say. But this revision number up here is just a number that tells me what revision it is in terms of the sale. And I really don't want to do anything with that. That's nothing I'm going to use, so I'll just unselect that. If there were any others that I could identify, and I would unselect. And down here is this automatic one I was referring to earlier. It just tells me the number of rows I'm going to have in my internet sales table. It will build that for me. So I do next, And now it brings up the dimensions, and it has a table of dimensions that I want, and I'm looking at all of them, and these are all the ones that I've selected before, but it also adds at the bottom down here my fact table. And sometimes you do want to slice and dice on maybe a particular value in the fact table and make it a dimension, and there's actually a term for that. It's called a degenerate dimension, and this particular example, I'm not going to want to do that. But you could, it depends on the business case that you would be using here. And now I have this. I have the cube name. All I have to do is click finish. I'm not real crazy about this, so I'll just add a cube on the end of it, and I finish it. And if you look at it, the creation was successful. Now underneath here I have a cube. I have some dimensions as well that has been added, and I have a new diagram with a sort of a yellow highlight and dark blue around for my dimensions in my my fact table, or my measure groups actually is an appropriate term at this particular stage. And so now I've got one final thing you need to check before you actually deploy your project is to take a look under project and come all the way down to where the bottom of the properties section is, and then come where it says deployment, and check this target. Sometimes the default conditions aren't correct. I'm running this in a virtual machine, so I can say localhost here and it's perfectly fine. You may have to actually type in this the actual analysis services instance to which the project is going to be deployed, your particular one, and also the database to which the project will be deployed to should be in here, and this one defaults to the name of the solution as well. So check those before you actually deploy to make sure that everything is good to go. Otherwise you might get an error message. So we'll do an OK. I need. Now we're ready to deploy the cube based on this structure, this particular design. And before we'll do that, let's bring up SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll take a look at it as a before picture. So here's Management Studio, and this is our structure we've been using. Nothing sort of changed a lot. Here's the AdventureWorks. This is our data source, and this is what we were using in earlier when we were using SSIS. And so nothing is different. So let's go ahead and go back to our BIDS, our Business Intelligence Developer Studio, and let's go ahead and deploy this to the server. We're going to build this. I go down here and I want to deploy this particular project with the cube to the server itself. Click on it. Starting the build, you can see down here. It's built it. It's starting to deploy. As deploy is started, you can see what's going on down here. It's added to the database. It's deploying and processing. It's building. It's actually putting data in the cube so we can use it and browse it. And it's done, and the deploy succeeded. So we take a look at. So it appears that nothing has actually happened, but in point of fact it has. If you remember, these databases here are relational databases that we have, and SSIS creates not a relational database but actually a collection of cubes. So we can connect to that. If we go back up here to the connect and go to analysis services and connect to that using our Windows authentication, it cranks a little bit, and now we have this Microsoft Analysis Services database that's in addition to the relational database we have here. And if we take a look at the databases, we have one that was that's the name of our project in BIDS that we use. And if we drill down further, we have a data source, a data view, and it turns out to be a cube as well that we have. And we can continue to drill down. We have a set of measure groups. In this case, there's one. And here are some information about the measure groups there. There's the dimensions, expanding those. And again, these are the tables that we had. So we were successful in generating our cube. And then in the next video, what we will do is we will browse it. We'll see that, you know, there's not exactly everything we had hoped it would be. It's kind of raw, and that we need to make some changes of that. So let's get started with the next video.